Hi there, my name is Ginger. I am the founder of Otona. We are a social enterprise and our mission is to connect people around the world. We use dot mandalas as a symbol of all the positive things that we do. So the dots in each design represent you, me, each person who's taking part. And then the mandala, the organized design, represents how we are working together to do something positive. Thanks for joining me today to dot your copy of the Children's Wish Foundation pattern. This is a step-by-step system that I developed so that people around the world can take part in our initiatives easily and feel connected to other people while doing something really super fun. So grab your materials and enjoy painting your way through the Children's Wish Foundation mandala with me. So let's talk about the materials you need to create your Children's Wish Foundation mandala. You will need either our set of 7 dotting tools or our set of 8. So let's talk about if you have the set of 7. So you will need those, and you will need a surface to dot on that is approximately 6 inches across in all directions. So you can use the disc that came in your kit or something else if you wish. Cardstock's great, canvas, whatever you would like. So have that, and I suggest that it is a black surface. The colors really pop. So you've got your tools and you have your disc. If you are using our set of 8 size dotting tools, and mine have been used a bit here, these ones, you will need a dotting surface that is approximately 3 inches across, which the disc in your kit would be. So you need tools and a dotting surface. You also will need paints. So the great thing about this design is very few paints are needed. You will need 2 shades of blue, and you can even take your darker blue and mix a little bit of white to make the lighter one. So 2 shades of blue, as you see here. You will need a light orange color, and a yellow color, white, and then we have black just for some touching up if we need it. If you wish to, you can have near you the copy of the written instructions, although you don't need it. That just might be how you like to learn. I will be talking all the way through the instructions, so you might decide that that's enough for you. And then you will need a piece of paper towel or 2 just to clean tools in between steps. So I believe that's everything. Make sure you have all of your items, and away we go. Let's take a look, everybody, at how to use the dotting tools. For this, I just have a plain piece of cardstock. It really can just be anything at all that you have laying around. A piece of paper of any type most likely will be fine for doing a little practice. So go through this process of learning to use the tools if you're new to dotting. The first tool I'm going to get us to try, and we're talking about our set of 7 tools, is tool 6. If you're working with our set of 8 dotting tools, you can use any of the flat end surfaces. So these are very similar in size, so you get one that is similar to that. Pick a color. I'm going to use white so that you can see it. And this is what you do with your flat end tools. So both sets have flat end tools. You're going to hold the tool straight up and down. And what I want to encourage you to doing, as you can see as I make dots, you're going to see that my tool always stays perpendicular. I never angle it off to the side. Even if you're worried about paint dripping off of the bottom, I want you always to move back and forth like this. That's going to keep the paint even on the bottom. Get your dots as best as they can when you go ahead and make them. So you'll see here as I make a few dots, and I'm just putting them anywhere in this practice, that I go back and forth to the paint and get more paint. Now that's really important. So what I'm doing is I'm letting my tool just touch the surface of the paint. I'm very gently touching the surface of the paper, and critical here, I'm going back and forth every time I want to make a new dot. And what you'll see is because I'm picking up about the same amount of paint, my dots are turning out all consistently the same size, and they're about the size of the bottom of the tool. So if you use a different size tool, which I'll do right now, I'll just pick maybe like tool 3 or 4 to show you, and you do exactly the same thing. go back and forth, you're going to get dots that are about the same size. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind as you do this, you can see this one turned out a little bit odd shaped compared to the others. Little things like that are really just little. When you're looking at your whole entire piece, if some little dot is a little odd shaped, I want you to push yourself through the process. Really hard sometimes for adults to let go and not worry about things. I want you to give this process 45 minutes from the time we start putting our dots into our design before you worry about things. Dots can be a little misshapen, they can be a little bigger or smaller, and it all will be okay. Okay? Now let's take a look at one of the tools that is metal tipped. So if you can get the one in your set, if you are working with the set of 7, or if you're working with our set of 8, go ahead and get one of those out. They've got 4 in there. So this tool works differently than the other ones. You have a piece of metal that is round and you can hold it like a pencil. What you can do is dip that tool into the paint and go back and forth and make more dots, just like you did with the flat end tools, and you will get dots that are about the same size. So that's one technique that this tool will do. The other thing here is, this is super fun. If you pretend there's an imaginary line, you can touch along that imaginary line, keeping the dots really close together, and you get this, I call it the taper. Get smaller and smaller dots, and it's really super cool. Looks way harder than it actually is. Okay? Now, if you were working with our set of 7, I'm going to get you to do one more practice, and that is with our biggest tool, tool 1. This one uses lots of paint, and it actually is, for most people, the most challenging. So there's a couple extra tricks I like to tell people. The first is, as you get working with these bigger tools, if you're working with a light surface like paper, you have to hold the paper down. It has to stay put on the table, or else it's going to stick to the tool when you lift up, and then you get some kind of weird shape dot going on. So you do everything else the same, except you are holding the paper down and you're going really slowly over to the paper to just let this paint disperse underneath. I don't think I had quite enough paint, but that still turned out pretty good. I'm going to do one more so you can see it. What's happening here is I am just letting the paint touch the paper, and my tool doesn't actually touch the paper. And you can see, if you're new at this, you need to know that this is okay. You're seeing lots of paint kind of puddling here in the middle, and that's all what you want to see happening. So the key thing here with this big guy, hold the paper down, go really super slow so that the tool does not make contact with the paper. And even if you've got some weird shaped dots going on here, don't worry about it too much. The biggest thing with tool 1 is aim for really nice big dots. Can't make them too big. You can make them a little too small, but you can't make them too big. That extra paint you see there in the middle is going to dry, and when you touch your finished piece, you can see it here if I turn it maybe a little bit, it's almost three-dimensional. You can feel the dots, that dried paint. So practice up with your tools, get comfy and familiar with them before you move on. Let's take a look at how these patterns are created so we're aware what's about to come. This is the Children's Wish Foundation mandala painted with our set of 7 sizes tools. This is with our set of 8 dotting tool sizes. Exactly the same process and steps, just different tools in our hands. The designs start in the center with a circle painted first here, and then they build outwards. And there's a lot of organization going on. As you'll see here, there is the same size dots painted with the same color. And if we count them, there are 8 of those. If we look at the white with the blue on it, that happens 8 times with the same size tool. And the same thing's happening over here on our small version. So that's how the design is built, from the center outwards, with steps happening with the same tool and color. The other thing is that the pattern is painted in layers of color. This is the design with just the bottom layer. This is the design with all 3 layers. In between each layer, you have to let it dry so that you're painting on top of dry dots. The bottom layer takes the most amount of time, takes about 70% of our time, and then the rest of the layers are quite a bit quicker. Just keep in mind as you're painting that it's very common to have a spill, for something to happen along the way, and it's totally fixable. What you need to do is if you spill something, you need to let it dry, paint over it with black paint in that area, and then just redo that spot. So keep that in mind. It's very, very common, even if you have lots of practice for there, especially to get paint out around the outer edges. Sometimes something happens in here with our dots and we don't like what's happened for whatever reason. So just keep that in mind that you can fix it. The other important thing to remember here is that dots in everybody's experience can be painted just slightly different. So when you're looking at these ones, these are my examples. I've been doing it quite a bit and they will look very similar because it's me doing it. And what I mean by that is I just have a consistent size that my dots turn out. Your size dots might be a little bit different. They might be a little smaller and they might be a little bigger. It doesn't mean they're any worse or better than mine. The other thing is you might notice more spaces between your dots and your steps than mine, or it might even be closer together. That's all fine too. So I like to think of these as songs, and everybody's voice is a bit different. It's going to look very much the same, but we're going to know it's your voice. The other thing is that this is a skill. If you want to try it over and over again, you'll find that your dots get more consistent in size and in placement, and you can kind of fine tune to get it to how you want it to look. Yours is still going to look very similar to this when you're all finished. So that's how the process works. Let's get started. Let's take a look now at how to create the very center dot and the first set of 8. It's really the foundation for your entire piece. Taking a look at our steps on our directions, we're going to need tool 1. I'm going to do this demonstration first with our larger disc and our set of 7 tools, and then I will replicate the process on the small version. So get yourself your tool number 1 and get your white paint ready. I have found the center of my work surface and I have marked it with a pencil mark. Make sure you do that first. So you want the center of your surface. That's where we're going to be starting from. Here you're going to take your white paint and go on over and make a dot to cover up that spot where you marked the middle. And I'm checking this dot should be about the size of the bottom of my tool. Next, looking at our instructions, we need tool 6. Just wiped my tool off and put it down and find tool 6. The color we're going to work with to make the set of 8 dots is light blue. So we have our 2 shades of blue. This is the lightest. So when we make our set of 8 dots, the very first ones, I'm going to do 2 dots, and then I want you to make those same 2. You're going to notice a little pattern emerge as we make the 8 dots. I'm going to do the first one right above the white that I made for the center. And if this was a clock, it's going right above the white, and my goal is for that to almost touch. If they do touch, no big deal. We're just going to see if we can do our next one a little more precise, and if there's a gap between them, same thing. Just see if you can get a little closer. So first 2 dots go, one at the top, one at the bottom, and if this was a clock, this is above the 12 and this is below the 6. So that's the process that we're going to repeat a few times. What we do is return our surface that we're painting on, so these 2 dots go off to the sides. And we're going to repeat the placement of those same 2 dots. We're going to put one at the top, and our goal here is for that to divide the distance in half. Then we repeat the process down at the bottom. So there's our 2 dots, top and bottom. We should have 4 light blue dots. I turn my surface again so that these 4, if I was to draw imaginary lines through them, they make an X. And I do the same 2 dots, top and bottom. And you'll notice, even though I could take my hand and put it here to the left and the right, I'm going to encourage you to not change the position of your hand. Instead, change your work surface. So your hand is always working from the same position. So that gives me 8 dots on the bigger version. I'm just going to set that aside and show you the process here with our smaller version. So I need tool 1 in my set of 8 sizes, and I'm just going to do this one a little quicker, but I do want you to see it in case this is what you are using. And I find tool 6, and you'll notice as you watch that I do the same thing, but it's just on the miniature side. Now the reason I get people to turn their piece is so that as we build out, alignment will become easier to achieve. Things will be able to be straighter. Okay? Now if any of those 8 dots on either version look a little bit smaller than the rest, just take your tool and go back over the paint and just paint it again. So like one of these dots is just a hair tinier. I can see that. So I'm just going to go back over it here, and it can kind of grow out a little bit. And there you have it. You have your setup for your Children's Wish mandala. Let's start to build our design out. What I'm going to do is tell you a tool size, and I will demonstrate the whole 8 dots in that step on first the large and then the small. For this first step, building outwards, we need tool 5. And the tool sizes are the same no matter what size you're working with. So I'll be beginning here with this big one. We want tool 5, and the color we're going to use is light orange. Colors may not show exactly true in my video here too, so just keep that in mind. We want light orange, tool 5. Let's take a look at where we're going to put our next set of 8 dots. In between each of our blue, we have a space, and if we count them, we've got 8 spaces. Those will be our guide for the placement of the dot that we're about to make. So I am taking the space that is pointing down towards my belly button, and I am putting a dot in nice and close to the 2 blue with my light orange paint. Then I turn my piece and I find the next space. So again, my hand position is not changing. My surface is doing the moving. My hand is always working in the same position. So I'm going to keep repeating this process, redipping my tool into the paint for each of the 8 dots. My hand is always in the 6 o'clock position. So there it is on our larger one. Then I'm going to repeat the process. I find my tool 5. My tool 5 in my other set is a metal tip tool. And I'm just going to repeat that. Now I'm going to show here in this example that the other position that may work for you is up at the top. So you'll notice on this one I'm going to work from the top position. One of those 2 positions is going to be where your hand will be best, and it will really depend on your vision and what works for you. You may even decide to try going top and bottom like we did with our setup of the mandala with the blue dots. Either way, that's fine. What I don't want happening is your hand changing positions for all 8 dots. Okay? And I'm just taking a look. I'm going over the ones that are a little small. See how this one here is a little bigger compared to this neighbor guy. So you can always make a dot a little bit bigger before you move on. And that's what you want to do so your piece grows out symmetrically. Next step, so we're moving on to step D. And I'm going to always go back to my bigger version first. Step D says tool 7 and white. So the placement of that is just in here, right in there. So I'm just going to dip just the edge of this tool in there. So it's just picking up a little tiny bit of white paint. And I'm going to just stick it in there, and because it's really enclosed in there, there's not a whole lot I can do with alignment. So I'm actually just kind of scooting those in really quick, and I'm using a gentle touch. I'm doing my best to not let these white dots connect with the blue. So I'm controlling the amount of white that's going on there on my tool, and I'm controlling gently putting in the dots. So there it is on my big version. And now I'm going to repeat the process with tool 7 in my little version. So you'll see as we get building that some of these dots are really decorative. I would call this a more decorative step. This is really just adding another dimension to it, whereas some steps are very much a foundation, where the dot is like building the design outwards. That particular step didn't build it out, it just added to what was already created. Back to our big guy. We're moving on to step E. So step E, we need our bright blue paint. So this is the darker of the two paints that we have that are blue. So here's my bright blue, and here's my light blue. So this one's just a little bit, it's a bit darker. I've cleaned off tool 7 with my paper towel, so I've given it a wipe. And I'm going to use that bright blue paint right in here. So here's my light blue. There's the bright blue. And again, there's the dot up at the 12. Here it is down at the 6. So those are the two hand positions, and I turn my piece. What we're doing just now is we're starting to build outwards from the center. So I want you to start to imagine lines coming out from the blue dots all the way out, and we're going to see that that's going to extend as we build. It's kind of like a tree growing. It gets more rings every year. So we're not going to wait a year to put a new ring on. So there's the bigger one. And let's repeat this, the smaller one. And you'll notice that I'm doing exactly the same thing. It's just tinier. The dots. This is still tool 7. Still the same placement. And the same color. So that was step E. We've gone out that far already. And we'll switch back. We'll move on to step F. So I was just talking about these lines, these imaginary lines that are building out. And you're going to see that continue here. We want tool 4. So with step F, we're going to I'm going to put on a dot and talk about the alignment. So don't do anything just yet. Let me put a dot here at the top and one down here at the bottom. Okay, so what you'll see here is we have our imaginary center position of our circle in the middle, the white one, and it's building out on these imaginary lines. Now, what's tricky when you're starting, or even after you've done a few, is getting these lines to extend symmetrically, evenly, and straight. So as we get going, I'm going to teach you as many tricks as I can to get that going correctly. And then even if it gets a little crooked, as it's very common to do, including mine, we'll talk about how we can bring the alignment back into place. And I don't want you to worry about if your things are starting to come a little crooked. Just know that I'm going to keep guiding you through some tips around making them straighter. So as you build these out, these blue dots with tool 4, you want to continue. I sometimes even will take my hand, hover over that middle position, and draw it down over top of that imaginary line that I was just talking about. And you'll notice as we're building these dots, I'm trying to keep them as close to the last one without touching. That's always the guide. I'd say always, but I guess I should say 99% of the time that is an accurate way to describe the placement of these dots. Okay, so you can see that that's really bringing our piece out another dimension. It's like that, like I said, a ring of a tree. And my beautiful tools are starting to show that they've had some action. How awesome. Got a little bit of blue paint, even though I wiped the paint off. And let's go over here and do the same thing on our smaller version. So I get tool 4, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, keeping these dots as close to the last ones as I can. So anytime you build a set of 8 dots outwards, this set is extending the design. Just take a look and analyze, do you have any small ones? Are there any runts of the litter? And if there are, before you move on to the next step, get some paint and paint right over top of that same dot. Like if this one was too small, I get the same tool back into the paint, go back over it to make it grow a little bit. You can grow a dot, you can't shrink a dot. So what we want to see is these dots to be about the same distance out from the center. Like we could draw a circle right there. That's what we're hoping for. If yours doesn't look exactly like that, just know it's normal. Totally normal, and we'll just kind of keep going, and I'll keep giving you as many tips as possible to have success. So we wiped off tool 4, and we're going to pick it up again. So it's clean here. It's got some blue. Actually, I think I'll turn it around and use this end so you're not confused with what I'm doing. What we're going to do now is take tool 4, and it's going to be making a dot in here. So I'm going to get you to do a dry run. Dry tools, just taking it here and seeing if it's going to fit. You know, do you have enough room in there? And if the answer is yes, in all 8 areas, great. Keep tool 4 in your hand. If the answer is no, and you say, Ginger, it's too squishy in there, I'm going to run into dots I've already painted. Just switch this tool for one a size smaller. And you'll use that smaller tool in all areas if you need to, or only in the ones that it's a little squishy. If you say, Ginger, I have tons of room, I could use a bigger tool. Don't use a bigger tool. The biggest tool that I want you using is tool 4. So what we're going to do, and you can see I'm having to be very gentle here because I can fit tool 4 in, but I have to be careful. If I was to push a little harder, we'd start to get these yellow dots. Sorry, I forgot to tell the color. The color is bright yellow. So tool 4 in bright yellow, this is step G we're doing. So, oh, and you can see that little tiny thing popping out. I'm just letting that go. So one common thing to happen is people using a wrong tool size, people using a wrong color. If that happens, you just stop and let that paint dry, and then you can paint right back over it. This is a good time. I'll finish this step here and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. We'll do a little fix here. So I'm just going to be able to squeak this in here. I find this a little squishier than my bigger version. So this is tool 4 bright yellow. You can see I'm doing the 12 o'clock in the 6 o'clock position here on my small version. So this is what they look like here. And if you did have something that was a mistake, this is our practice. Whoops. And it is dry enough to show you this. So let's pretend this is a mistake. You take black paint, take one of the metal tip tools and dip it in the black paint. And then you can erase it. So that's how you get rid of a mistake. I mean, that's the general thing to do. And then you let that dry and you can go back over that spot. So key thing is you have to have dry paint to do the fix. So here we have our design up until the point of step G. All right, this is a dangerous spot. Ooh, danger. Because we have this beautiful circular shape showing up, and anytime we kind of get to that point and we're about to build outwards, we could put our dots in the wrong position. So I'm going to talk you through this, and hopefully we will all end up with our dots where we want them. The first thing is to get the tools. We're going to go back to this one and do it on here. We want tool 6 for this step. We're working on step H. So what we're doing with this is taking some white paint in this step. And the danger part is that we want to focus on building out on this line where we have our light blue and then our 2 darker blue shades. So this is the line we want to focus on. We're going to be aligning our next dot with that. Always the blues. And we're going to ignore the yellow. So the danger is that we could put our dot in line with the yellow. Don't want that. Now, if that happens, you just saw what to do. You got to let it dry and then you can erase it. But we're going to do our best to stay focused. So here it is. Here's my first dot. My center's here. I'm again building out on this line. I'm going to do one up here at the top of the other blue. I'm totally ignoring the yellows. So blues, 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 blues are my focus. Here's my line. Put a dot. Here's my line. Put a dot. Ignore the yellows. And then I do the next one. And the next one. So there we go on our big one. And every time, even if something was a little crooked in there, I'm always focusing on the center so that my next dot can be as connected to the center as possible. Let's repeat that here, and I'll talk you through what I just said so you can hear it again. So even if these dots got a little bit crooked, this white dot aligns with the center. So this aligns with the center. There we go. And I'm ignoring all of my yellows. Perfect. All right. So the next step is the big one. We've got tool 1 coming up, and you know that's going to cover a lot of territory. That's the biggest tool. I'm going to switch back to my larger version. And we're going to be working with that bright blue again. So we've marched our way out from the lighter blue, we've got 2 darker blues, and then this white. And what we're doing in this step is one more time, we're covering a lot of territory with bright blue. Big, huge dots aligned with the center in that white dot we just did. So even if things were a little tiny bit crooked, we can kind of adjust this dot to the left or the right to make an adjustment to the alignment. I tend to like making my dots down at the bottom position, so you're going to see me here with these big guys doing that. Take your time with them. I'm pretty quick just because I've done a whole bunch of dots, so don't need to keep up with my pace. Just pause the video and get these on. So these are really a foundation dot. This is probably the last big, important, challenging spot in the whole thing, to be honest, is just getting these lined up with the white dots. Usually around now people start to realize if they're working on a surface on our desk. I've given you some extra room. You shouldn't run out of room because I've budgeted some extra space. So let's do that here on the small version with tool 1 in bright blue. And again, I find with these tools that I do work top and bottom sometimes. You'll see me doing that here. Aha, perfect. All right, here's our side by side, big guy and the little guy. And we're moving on to step J. So step J, you need tool 4 again. Tool 4 gets used quite a bit in this bottom set of dots. So tool 4, and we want light orange. Now this particular step, you remember me saying I'm going to give you all the tricks to help you get things out of alignment. So on your way out here, you might have things kind of moving off to the right or moving off to the left. And this particular dot is going to be the beginning of the outline. Let me just show you here. So we've just made, here's our finished one. We've just made this big blue dot here. And this is the dot we're about to make. And it aligned with the center. And it can kind of fool the eye to help the viewer see things a little more in alignment than it may have been on its way out. So let this light orange dot be as connected and lined up with the center. Even if things here went a little to the left or right, don't align with what's out of alignment, align with the center. So this is tool 4 and it's light orange. And you'll see me, if you could see my face, you'd see that I'm visualizing that center white dot. And sometimes I do what you see my hand doing, which is just kind of start it in the center and pull it outwards. Sometimes I just use my eye and look into the center, whichever one works for you. And as you practice, you'll get figuring out what is your best technique. So that's going to be the start of outlining our big, beautiful dots. And let me repeat that here on my little guy. That's what we're doing. This is when it gets all fancy and you can't tell people how easy it is to make all these little dots. We're going to be encircling our blue ones with smaller and smaller dots. This is the start of it. So this is tool 4 in the light orange again. There. There's the side by side. Now you've really laid down the foundation here so far. You're doing awesome. If you've got yourself this far, it's really decoration here on out. And we need tool 6. This is step K we're on. Get my tool 6. So this step's, I like it a lot. I'm going to sacrifice a dot here for you too. There's going to be a dot that is sacrificed in your honor. Because this step I've found, and when I teach it to people, if I show it the right way, a lot of people understand. And then if I show it the wrong way, everybody understands. So I'm going to show you one of each. We need our bright yellow. And let me show you the right way first. This is what we want to see. We want to see a bright yellow dot on each side of the orange one we just did. And we want it to be almost touching our blue. Okay, so they're almost touching that blue. Here's what we don't want to see with my bright yellow paint. There. Now it looks probably like a tiny difference, but you can see a little tiny space in here. And when we get to the step that comes after this, that little tiny space is going to be a bit of an issue. You can work around it, but if you don't need to put a space there, then don't. So here I am back on track. So this one's kind of flying away from the blue. It's scared of the blue, doesn't want to make contact. This one does. This is what we want. So you're going to do that on every side. So this particular step, you're technically getting, not technically, you are getting 16 dots. You're doing it in all 8 areas, but each area gets 2 dots. one on each side of the orange. So just a note about the colors here. You'll notice that they are inspired by the Children's Wish logo, of course. And it really is quite effective to have so few colors and it just pop like that. It's really quite nice. So let's do that, repeat that with our small one. I'm not going to sacrifice one on here because it works the same way though. You want it in nice and close. And I'll just kind of boogie along here so they're on. So you can see this isn't really, you know, working on alignment like the last couple of steps where this is all about decoration and filling in the design. It's a different role these dots have. Okay. Now do you remember doing in our practice these fun things? We're going to get to do that now. So back over to our bigger version, we need tool 7. This is step L we're about to do. So I'm going to show you what we want, what's going to happen, and then I'll tell you some things that people always ask me about this step. So we're working with white paint, and what we're going to do, and just take a look and watch me do this a couple times, is we're not working with white paint. This is perfect. I'm glad I made a mistake because we get to practice what we preach. So I'm going to wipe off my tool because this shouldn't be white. Remember I said the biggest things are white versus our colors and wrong tool sizes. We do not want white, we want light blue. So I'm just going to scooch over here and work here. We want light blue paint for this. So switch that up, and apologies if you just followed me that quickly. Just leave them. I'm going to show you how to erase them in a minute. So light blue paint, tool 7. We're going to do 1 dot, 2 dots, and you can just watch me do this a couple times and just march all the way until we run into somebody there. So what we did again, we dipped into the light blue once, twice, and go around here. So you could count how many little dots I just made, but I don't want you to. I want you just to make the amount of little blue dots, little light blue dots that you need to get around your distance. And you may find that your dots, if you decided to count them, which you don't need to, are the same on each side or they're different. You may discover you needed more over here than over here. It really doesn't matter. When the piece is all done, you're not going to count them and see that those decorations are just that, decorations. Now we're getting here to my spot where I sacrificed a dot for you. So you can see how this all connected. Now in here I just kind of have to go, okay, well I'll put that dot right there. So this takes different amounts of time. Meanwhile, my white mistake over here is just drawing away. I have 2 options for what I can do there. I could completely erase that with black paint. That's one option. And that's probably the best, is just to take black paint and paint over it and then start again. Or I could say, well, I think I could aim this blue paint right on top of it and completely cover up that white. I don't know if that would happen. I still feel like I'd see some of that white underneath. So if I was being really super fussy, the best way is to erase it with black paint. But right now that white is still wet, so I'm leaving it. I'm not doing anything to it. And I will go back in after and fix it up. So I'm boogieing along here. It's because I'm going to be doing 2 of these while you're sitting and doing 1 set. I'm going to do the smaller version here. So you don't have to go as fast as me. If you're doing this with some friends at the same time, if you're all doing it together, you'll notice people do this at different paces. And that's fine. So let me scoot over here and do this little guy. Now, this one I don't find I need to dip back in to get all the way around here. The only reason I was doing a redip on these guys over here is because I wanted to not run out of paint before I made it all the way around. The other tip with these metal tip tools, the other thing to make you aware of is that they actually can build up paint on them. So you'll notice this one here, you see it's got a little bit of blue paint on it, and that can build up. So you might want to wipe it off like I just did, because that starts your dots off small after you've done, you know, 2 or 3 sections. That's a good thing to do. That way you don't just keep kind of getting larger dots as you go around your 8 sections. All right, there we go. And we just have 2 more steps left to do. And I want you to notice that I've left this off here. Let me see, are they still wet? I'm just poking it. Yep, those are still wet. So I'm not doing anything to those just yet because it's wet. Let's take a look, switch this back over here. And we want tool 2. We're moving on to step M. So tool 2 is next, and what we're doing is we're going to be putting, I'm going to take the dry tool and show you with tool 2 where this is going. It's going to be going right in here. And our goal with these dots is, number 1, we want it to fit in there and basically almost connect with the light blue on each side. So you can adjust this tool 2, use a different tool if you need to, because this is the goal. Let me do one so I can explain it with an example. Okay, so this white dot almost touches those blue. If you find as you go around here and you just do a dry run test that you're going to have too little space and it's going to be too small, just use a different tool. There's a couple spots in every design where that's the case, where you got to check it out first. And this would be one where I would say, you know what, if your space is really large, your goal here is for this to almost touch. So you can use tool 1, or you could do this, you could take tool 2 and just go over it a second time, and you'll see that that dot expands a little bit, because that's your goal. So whatever is going to work here for you. And you're just imagining a circle all the way around, and you're putting this white dot on that circle. I'm going to take that in there, or go in here and do a double dot. Now eventually I'm going to get over here to my spot where I haven't completed this. So I'm just going to decide when I get over there, I may leave this white dot off until it's dry and I can fix it up, and I can show you that when we do layer 2. That's probably what I'm going to do. So you see some of these, I'm like, oh, I think I could make that a little bigger. And I just go ahead and put more paint on tool 2 and do that. So yeah, here I am over here with this area, and what I'm going to do is just leave off this dot, because its position is contingent on what happens in here with those blues. So I want that to happen first. So I'm just going to leave that off there. I love that that happened, so that I can demonstrate something like that occurring. Very, very common to do. And let's put in our white dots here. And the same thing applies here with this. We want to make sure we've got the space, enough space. We've got the right tool. And this is looking good. Here. And then we just have one more step to do on the bottom layer of dots. Perfect. All right, this is really taking shape. We're doing an excellent job. Look at this. All right, so we've got our kind of very glaringly open area here. So that's all right. We're going to fix it up in the second layer. Last step is step N, and you need tool 6. Light blue paint. Oops, I'm sorry. I just jiggled the camera. And what we're doing is we're going to put, turn this, here's our white dot we just did. Here's our yellow one from a couple steps ago. Just take a look where this position is. There it is. So it's almost touching the white, but it is in this imaginary line. So again, I'm going to leave it off on this section, so I don't have a white dot there yet. And I just keep going and doing that. Just fills in that space a little tiny bit. And then let's do that over here on our small version with tool 6. Okay. Well, I was going to say perfect. Almost perfect. What we're going to do now is you need to let your piece dry. So these dots are still nice and soupy. They're wet. You can let them dry by letting them just have some time to air dry, which is probably the ideal. You could also use a hair dryer to speed up the process. Doing that will crack the paint most likely. And if that happens to you, and because you decide to use the hairdryer, just know that what we're about to do is put dots on top of layers, or put more dots on top of the bottom. And so you can see here, for instance, our big blue is going to get a couple layers of dots. So even if your paint cracks, you're going to be painting it over. So make your choice about what you want to do. If you want to take a break and come back and do more after it's dry, or if you want to get the hairdryer out and just use it to speed things along, your choice. So let's take a second, whatever we need to do, and then we'll work on layer 2. All right, we are ready to do layer 2. If you take a look here, let's talk about my little boo-boo with the white paint back on layer 1. I took my metal tip tool, a little bit of black paint, and I have erased what was there. I took away those 2 white dots. So what I'm going to do before I put any bits of layer 2 on is I'm going to finish layer 1. So I'm just going to go back in here and put in the remaining steps. So one was to do that. Then I need my white paint in tool 2, so I'm just putting in the steps that were missing there. So these dots will be wet. All the other dots are dry, so I just have to keep that in mind. I'm not going to stop and dry them, and I can't put wet paint on top of wet paint. So when we do our layer 2, I'm going to leave that off until we get to dry paint with layer 3. So this little area here is always going to be a little bit behind, but that's okay. So let's move on now to layer 2 officially, that we've got that all fixed up. And as you can see, you'd never know I'd made that mistake. I could even go in here if I want, and you see this, if I'm really super fussy. I've noticed it just depends on the personality, what people worry about. Some people that would really bother them, that little shape. And me, I'm going to take the time, I guess, and see, I can just kind of shape that there with some black paint because that's dry. So let's work through layer 2. One thing about layer 2 that I've learned after teaching people is if you're a beginner, do not do the center just yet. So the center here, you can see that blue in the middle of the white dot in the very middle really stands out. And what I've discovered is if I get people new to this process and doing that step first, that blue dot ends up to the left or the right, up or down, and it's really tricky to get it in the center. And it's really visible compared to the other dots placements on the top layer. So what I'm going to ask you to do is leave the step A, or layer 2, this particular blue dot, just leave it. I'll do it with you a few steps in once we've got the hang of doing the top layer. So the other thing is we've got dry dots, and as we work on our piece, we want to do our best to make sure that our second layer doesn't completely cover up what we've put on the bottom. So I'll show you what I mean as we get going. So we are going to look at layer 2, step B. And the instructions tell us to get tool 7 and we need our bright blue paint. So step B, if you look in our instructions on the road map there, the picture of the design, you'll see a B on one of these particular dots. So this is step B, all of these 8 light blue dots. And what we're going to do is take the darker blue and put a dot right on the center. So you can still see some of the bottom. That's the important thing. So you just go around and getting that right in the center. And this part's really fun. Well, I like all of it. To be honest, I find all of it's really fun. And this is a way easier as well, I find, than the bottom layer. So if you're working with young kids, like this process start to finish, I would say reading the instructions and doing everything we're doing all parts of it on average, age 9, around grade 4 and up, can do the whole thing. Now, if you think about, because I'm a teacher, that's my background, what could we do to bring in the younger kids and get them involved? Here's where they could be involved. What if you were to do all of the bottom layer of dots, and then they could come in and do the part we're doing now? It would make it a really fun family way to get different age groups involved. You could have, you know, team siblings. Holy moly, we could piece by dotting in the family. Can you imagine the older sibling doing the bottom and the younger sibling doing the top, and all is peaceful in the household? Yes, I love it. So I'm just going to do the same thing here, and I'm just noticing these dots are a little heavy-handed. I'm going to back off and ease off here so that I can still see the bottom. All right, perfect. I'm going to get right in there so you can see those guys. See how tiny they are? There they are. And they're a little heavy-handed, but I can still see some of the bottom. If you take a look at step C was these orange dots that we did after we built our setup. We then got onto the orange. This is step C. So the instruction here, it says tool 6. Now this is a spot where you need to be very gentle, or you could completely cover up this bottom set of dots. So what I want you to do is decide right off the bat. You might want to switch tool 6, and I get a lot of people doing this. If you find that hard to control, if you do one and you're like, oh, I just completely covered up the orange, just take a breath and switch to tool 7. Now, I personally like a little bit more covered than that. So, you know, it's your personal preference of what's working for you. You can also, you know, really get a big dollop and go back over it and make it a little bit bigger. So you decide what works for you. The instructions there are going to say tool 6. You might find that's a little hard to control. So use tool 7 if that's the case. I'm going to go ahead and use tool 6, and I'm really using a light touch to keep it under control. And even then it's still, I've had my coffee today, that's the problem. Coffee and dotting, especially if you're not a big coffee drinker, like I just drink a tiny bit, and I can see the difference when I go ahead and try to keep my hands steady. So there's the big version, and let's do the little guy here. I find this a little easier to control here, this tool 6 on these guys. And you'll notice I'm not as sticking to always working on the top or bottom. You can kind of zoom around here pretty quick. So I'm doing these quicker because I'm doing 2 compared to your 1. So you take your time, do it at your own pace, and don't rush. Now, when we move on to step D and E, you'll notice there's some stars showing up in the written instruction. That means you don't need to do anything. So step D and E are this the white dots here and this little blue guy. Nothing's going on top of those, so that's done. The next step was F. You need tool 7. So let's go back to our pattern of always doing this big one first. So where is step F? I look at my instructions and I see step F is this bigger, not the biggest, but the bigger one than this guy here. So we've got these, and what we're going to do on that step is we are putting light orange. Now this is going to look really vibrant. Do your best to get that bang on the middle. It's going to take up less space. You still see lots of the blue. That's what we want. So this is the lighter orange going right in the middle, and it really pops. Those are complementary colors. They're opposite each other, and so when you layer one on top of the other, they really have that pop. And therefore, in the designs when I create them, I do this very sparingly. If you were to do it in all the steps, my goodness, it would just be really, really vibrant, and you might want to try that sometime just to see what I'm talking about. All personal preference in different things, and that would be certainly one of them. I like to use it sparingly. So we just go around here and do the same thing on this guy. Now, as we're doing this, we're getting the practice of aiming our dots in the center. We've still left off step A, and in a bit we're going to go back and do it after we've had a bit more practice. So let's do the brighter yellow, or the bright yellow out here. And it's tool 6 again. Now this is the light orange going on the yellow, and you'll probably find this a little easier to control. So the yellow here on the bottom is a little bit bigger than what was happening in here. So it's the opposite. We've got yellow on the bottom, orange on top, orange on the bottom, yellow on top. So it's just the opposite that we've put together. And I'm just going to go around here, making sure I can still see some of the yellow on the bottom. There we go. And what tool was that? Tool 6. There we go. Same thing out here. If you can hear rustling in the background, that's just my golden retriever, Sophie. She likes to join me down in this area of the workspace. All right. We're moving on now to the white dots. So I just generally do them in the order that they were painted on the bottom layer, but you don't have to. It's just kind of easier to work your hand out because you're keeping everything that's wet in the center moving out towards wet stuff, or keeping your hand away from the wet stuff as in moving out. But you could kind of move around in different order when you do this. It really doesn't matter. So we're putting light blue with tool 7 on the white. So just going around and doing that. This would be step H. Same thing here, just going really gentle because I find that on the little one I can get that completely covered if I'm not careful. That had a big goober of paint. I don't know if you can see it there on the camera. A little bit. Kind of picked up a paint that wasn't as fluid as the other bits. It still looks all right. But you can kind of see it in there. Now that would really bug some people and they would want to erase it with black paint. Then that's fine. You can see it kind of get a little bit of a blob there. I'm going to decide to leave it, but if something like that happens on yours, feel free to fix it up. Now this is the biggest dot that we're going to do our second layer on, and in the instructions I do say number 2. So I have found with about 30% of people this tool is too big. So it really is one where you need to check. I'm just going to back this camera up a little bit. What you need to do is just see, is that going to cover up your bottom big blue beautiful dot? And if the answer is a maybe or a yes, I want you to switch tools, even if it's a maybe. Because you'll have better control if you use tool 3. Tool 3's a little bit smaller, and you can have better control over what's going to happen. Now for me, I can get that, you know, on there with tool 2, and it shows still the blue around the bottom. So you decide, and even if you do one and you're like, oh no, I need to adjust, just go ahead and adjust, do the other 7 and learn from that first one, and you could always go back and redo that. You know, if something goes wonky on the top layer, again, dry it. You could go back over with tool 1 and put the blue paint down, the darker blue, and just start that step over. Really forgiving process. So get all this lighter blue here on top of the dark blue. Just reminds me of like Dreamy and the Children's Wish, and how it's all about having a dream. That's what these colors of the blues and the whites remind me of. And let's do the same thing over here. And again, like I'm even going to switch there. It really is on the smaller set of tools, I find I do need tool 3, and that even still might be a little bit on the big side. The increments here in this set of tools is so precise that, you know, if you're switching even from down 1 tool, you may even need to go down at 2 sizes, because there's such little difference between the sizes here. That's why that would be the case in these little ones. So take a look at the side by side and what's shaping up. Boy, we're doing a great job. Now we've got these yellows and oranges here. So on the light orange, which is our one that's right here in the middle, we're doing the same thing we did in here. We're putting orange on yellow and yellow on orange. So we're going to put, with tool 6, bright yellow on top of the light orange. So this is step J that we're working our way around. You can see how fast this comes together here. Now I got to pay attention as we get out here to these layers, outer steps. There's one of these big white dots that's still wet. There it is, right there. I got to remember, because I'll get on automatic pilot and get talking to all you people, all you fantastic people, and I'll forget. That's what's going to happen. We don't want that. There we go. And then, like I said, we're orange on the yellow. So we've got these 2 guys here. And just taking a dollop of that orange. This would be step, keep looking at my instructions, step J. Now, what's interesting, just so you know, is I'm recording this before we kick off this campaign and get people lined up. So I can't tell you from the perspective of this video who's joining us to dot, but I can tell you that we have people participating in Otona from multiple countries in general, so it's really super cool to have people uniting together, creating a symbol that represents something positive, that represents a voice of support. And that's what you're doing right now, is you're creating this symbol that represents everyone connecting together. I like to think of the dots as each person who's involved, and then when you unite it into some organized, beautiful thing, such magic happens symbolically in the painting of it, and it happens in this case financially for the support of young people who are receiving a wish from Children's Wish Foundation. So I hope that you enjoy the process, and I hope you enjoy the results, and I know that it will be meaningful to the people who are on the receiving end of this, of your participation, for sure. So there's our orange and our yellows, and now we've got our big white area. So this is tool 6. We're on step M. So this is our big one, where you're reminding me that this white dot is still wet. This is the one right here. So tool 6. Now this is going to take just a small area up of our white. So take the time to align this blue dot, this light blue dot, with the center. Try to get it centered within your white. Try to get it both aligned with the center as well. And it doesn't take up as much of a percent of this bottom dot as the others. So there's my wet one. I'm not going to be painting on it yet. I'll do it when we do layer 3, because this is the end of layer 2 as far as what needs to go on this particular step. So I'll let that dry before I do anything. There's the wet one right there. The little one in here is dry enough, so when I do that next step in a minute, I will put that on there because it's dry. The least amount of paint you have, the quicker things dry, as you're probably already seeing. You've got small dots, you're going to dry really fast. Now we got just one more step here on our bottom layer, except for the middle. We're going to go back here into the middle in a minute and put that center dot on. And let's do our final step here before we go back and do that, which is right in here, that little blue dot. We're going to take tool 7 and put on the bright blue right there. And again, even my one I just did when we started layer 2, it's dry enough to put this on here. So I'm going to keep on boogieing through. I've already done it. There it is. That's the wet one there, that wet white dot. And then the little guy right here, really tiny. Aha. Okay. So we've done all of the second layer except for the middle. Now the middle, like I said, is the most challenging because you are going to want to do your best to get this center blue smack dab in the middle of the white. So what you can do if you want to, get a piece of practice paper, do a bunch of the bottom dot, which is white with tool 1, just put it on a practice sheet and practice going into this, getting this in the center. So let's go back even to the practice I did here. You can see here's some white dots, and it's tool 3 that you use, and it's bright blue. So let me just move this out of here. So what can happen is, you know, if you were to do this, like, you can get it off tilt. See how that's kind of off to the side? And what we want, as best as we can, is for it to be in the middle of our dot. So we don't want this, and we do want this. You know, if you get this happens, you can dry it, put the white right over top of it, basically start again. So the other thing, like I said, is just to do a practice. Go back to your practice sheet and do what I'm doing right now and see if you can get it bang on. And once you've got the hang of it and you've done a few successfully, then go back in here to this. Because I do find that we can see this dot quite visibly in the design. It stands out, especially if it's off center like that. You will notice it. So it's one of those things that's worth practicing. So here comes my center dot. This is step A. I'm going back and doing it for layer 2. That's pretty good. And we're going to do the same thing here with this one. So where is my tool 3 for my set of 8 sizes? Here we go. There. So we have our second layers minus one little spot right there that's still drying. So what you have to do before doing layer 3, and if you look at layer 3, if you take a peek at the instructions, there's only one step to go. Only one. But we still have to have dry dots. Do not push through and do it with wet dots. They're going to be going on here, and those are still wet. So let it dry or use a hair dryer, and then join me to do layer 3. Let's finish up our Children's Wish pattern. First thing I'm going to do is take care of this spot right here it is missing its second layer. So I'm just going to put that right in here. There we go. So now all of my layer 2 is caught up. Everything's ready to go for layer 3. My dots are dry. You can see they've cracked just a little bit there, but there's going to be some paint going right on top. So layer 3, there's only one spot to put dots, and that is step J. No, sorry, step I. I'm looking over my shoulder and my eyesight didn't get the right line there. So we want step I, which is this spot where we've had bright blue on the bottom, the lighter blue on top, and now we're going to take tool 6. We need white paint, and we're just going to put that right on the very top, and that does a good job of hiding that cracked paint. There we go. So I'm just going to go around and do that in all 8 areas. First on this big guy, and then I'll show it on the smaller version created with our set of 8 size tools. There we go. So the big one is now complete. We've got some wet paint there. We've got to keep that in mind and let that dry. Let's swap over here to the little one. And we have just a little tiny bit of white. It's like a little highlight to these big dots. It just kind of helps them pop and glow. It's a small amount of work for, I think, quite a lot of impact to round off the piece. So here we go. I'm going to show these 2 down here on the table before bringing the camera back up. We have our big one created with our set of 7 dotting tools, and we have our smaller version created with our set of 8 dotting tools. So let me bring the camera up just so that we can remember. I gotta turn that around, remember what I look like. So I want to thank all of you for joining, for dotting your way through the Children's Wish Foundation mandala pattern with us, for supporting Children's Wish, for supporting Otona's mission to connect people. So I'm just going to hold this up. Whatever you would like to do with your finished Children's Wish patterns, completely up to you. If you would love to or like to, please feel welcome to share a photo of your piece and connect it to Otona's social media. We would love to see what's happening, and then we often will collect the photos and share them as a collage. It's a really powerful way to see that there are people doing something together from different places around the world, uniting to do a positive action, in this case support Children's Wish Foundation. Here's my little tiny one with Otona on the back. So thanks again for joining me, everybody. I hope you had fun. I know I did. Bye-bye.